So if you do have if you would prefer not to be recorded, please do turn your cameras off. So the recording has started, as far as I'm aware. I'll just double check, make sure it is. Yep, it is perfect. So I think Sophia's here as well now. So just for those of you that just arrived, please do put your name and your organisation in the chat, just so we know who everyone is. So today's Lunch and Learn will be delivered by Sophia Mahmood. Sophia is the CEO of Empowering Minds, and she's developed a simple purpose to help organisations and individuals to turn the theory of their organisation into practice, and then they do that with EDI at the heart of everything. Sophia's organisation, Empowering Minds, have a belief that everyone should be given an opportunity, which I think is much needed in our 21st century workspaces. And today they'll share with us more about how they deliver these opportunities in a variety of ways. So without further ado, Sophia, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm really looking forward to presenting to you. There'll be a chance for you guys to get involved in some interactiveness within the session. We have approximately an hour starting from now. I'm hoping that we will wrap up around about 1:15 to leave 15 minutes free at the end to have questions and answers if should there be anything. So, as Simon mentioned, we're Empowering Minds Consultancy, and we're an organisation that is based in Bradford. And the reason why the consultancy was set up was to make sure that we can implement theory into practice. I'm going to play a short video for you, which tells you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Can I just ask, you can all hear that?
I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, I'm going to break this video down to you a little bit more in terms of what our work has been so far and some of the work that we have done to date. So, like Simon said, we have a simple purpose, which is to help organisations turn their theory into practice. And the reason why I wanted to establish an organisation that implements theory into practice was, after 21 years of service within the statutory sector, the VCS sector, what I realised is that we had individuals that had the academia, but when it came to implementing it into practice, those models of engagement weren't there. We do this in a way that there's three elements. You engage with the service. Once you've engaged with that service, you educate that service, and through the education, you will inspire. But how do we change ways of thinking? How do you change the ways that you think, and how do you change the ways your workforce thinks? And that is, if knowledge is the key, mind is the lock, i.e. you need the key to unlock the lock, and you need the knowledge to unlock the mind. What makes us unique? We're Bradford based, and even though we're Bradford based, our reach has all the way been to international now. But what makes us unique as a service is we tackle highly controversial areas of work, areas that make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, make people question things, and make people feel like, are we actually part of a system? So some of the things that we cover around inequality, misogyny, institutional racism, representation and systems. And I'll go on to show you how we've embedded that within our clients and that we've worked with. We believe that one size does not fit all. So what we do is we tailor our services to meet your needs. And this is about every organization. You can't have a sweeping, as we have sweeping statements, you can't have a sweeping model that works for everybody. And that what we've got to look at is quite lazy. And what we need to be thinking about is what's going to work for our audiences and what's going to work for our clients that we work with. We're always refreshing our approach, so we make sure our training modules are up to date, we make sure our research is up to date because we're ahead of emerging trends. And our work is both local and national. Our strands are all about having a golden thread of EDI, and as the presentation showed you, we only focus on these areas of work around citizenship, diversity, cohesion, training development and safeguarding and personal development, because that is literally our forte of importance of the work that we focus on. The service that we could offer and that we do offer are lectures, workshops, training, events, conference support and project management. And we've worked with quite a number of clients, and this is just to give you a handful of some of the clients that we have worked with, from Home Office to Race Equality Network, to Leeds City Council, to West Yorkshire Police, to Public Policy, to NHS, to Beckfoot School, Bradford Academy, to Manchester BME Network, to Manchester Council. So we go where the work is required, and what we say to all our clients that we work with, or all our partners that we work with, that it's really important that we are part of a solution, that we're not there to look at that we have the answers for everything, but to be part of a solution. Reviews of our services have been well received. On our website, you will find further reviews of the work that we've done. I've given you one review from Dr. Sarah Senker, where we work together closely on a report from the Home Office, and then I've given you one from Kirsten England, CBE, who's our Chief Exec for Bradford Council. To break down some of the work that we have done and some of the themes that we have covered, when I say highly controversial and quite challenging, some of those have been around workforce training, around belonging, unconscious bias, and building high performance teams. Some have focused on Islamophobia training for HR staff within education establishment. Some have been West Yorkshire Police in terms of their DEI strategy and their workforce culture. I've been fortunate enough to work with a number of services on the recruitment of directors' positions and chief exec positions. We've done work around reports, reviews of young people's services, hate crime strategies, and even all the way to Kosovo, where we were asked to be an advisor to women's organisations, and we've done keynote speaking. That's enough about Empowering Minds Consultancy and what we do. And now what I want to break it down to is ask you guys a question and look at how do we embed this work into your organization. So one of the questions I'm going to ask you, and I want you to use the chat box for this, is why are you here today? And I just want you to be totally honest in why are you here? And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no rhetorical question. It's not a rhetorical question. It's simply asking you, why did you come here today? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just put your comments in the chat, and then see what everyone, obviously, why everyone joined.
If anyone would prefer to take the mic, please feel free to do so. And like Sophia said, the chat's there as well, if you prefer to just type.
Yes, it's totally optional, as Simon said. It's entirely a choice, but I just wanted to get an idea of why people came today. And as Simon said, is it to learn more about Empowering Minds Consultancy? Is it to learn from each other? Is it to know, what are the areas of focus that other people want to look at? Was it a learning session from each other? So realistically, just, your honest opinions. Okay, thank you. It seems like everyone seems to wanting to learn more about Empowering Minds Consultancy and its work that it does. So everything that I am going to cover in the next few slides is going to give you an idea of what we deliver to other services and what we look at. and to get some practical tips on looking at EDI into practice and what does that look like within practice. So thank you so much. So I'm going to ask you another question, and the question is, and let's keep this clear cut. If you had to describe the current global situation in one word, what would that be? Just one word. And this is just a question for you guys, that if someone said to you one day, describe the current global situation in one word, what word would you use? And just be honest, there's no right or wrong answer in this. Okay, some really interesting ones. So we've got tragic, dire, underdeveloped, highly political, desperate, unstable, critical, confusing. Thank you. Imbalanced. So the reason why I asked you for one word, because language is so important within your workforces. It's really important that we provide a safe space for staff to have conversations, and that we provide a safe space for individuals to look at what it is that is their opinion and be able to give them a platform to share their opinion. And language is crucial when we're engaging with our workforces and our staff, and when we're looking at EDI or DEI in that sense. So I asked you a question. Why did I ask you that one question? It was understanding that words are very, very powerful. So anytime that we're working within our organizations, or we're putting any comms out there, or we're putting any training out there, that we understand the words that we are using and the impact that it can have. Language can state so much, and it's down to how it's interpreted. So what language are we using? Are we making sure that language is universal? Is it accessible? Is it engaging? By one word, you create energy, and it's understanding. So I'm just going to take like the word critical, unstable, confusing, highly political, desperate. Automatically you're taking an energy level in that's saying, I have concerns, I am worried. So it's understanding that one word can create energy. So do we use positive language, or do we use negative language within our workforces? So for instance, if there's an area of concern that a staff member raises, how do we respond to that? And do words bring positive energy, or do they bring negative energy? And how do we respond to that? So we respond to something in how it is delivered to us. So for instance, if we're asking a question, and I'll give you an example, just recently, I was speaking to an organization in Cornwall, and I was trying to discuss some agreements on dates of delivery, and some of those dates of delivery were coming across in the month of Ramadan. So if those of you that are not aware, month of Ramadan is approaching around 23rd of March, and it's when Muslims will be fasting for 30 days. And what I asked one of the staff members was, could we be considerate of the dates of delivery, just because we wanted to make sure that our staff have enough time to travel, and our staff are okay when traveling, because they will be fasting. And the response I got was, oh, don't they work in the month of Ramadan? And that wasn't a negative response. I could have taken that in a negative context, but language again is so important, and the words that we use. Now, if he had rephrased that saying, Sophia, I'm not 100% sure on something, can I just ask a question? Do your staff work in Ramadan? But we've already agreed we've already agreed that we're going to be working together. So he's aware that the staff will be working in Ramadan. It was the response of how he said, well, don't your staff work in Ramadan? And taking in consideration that my staff would have to travel 6 hours consecutive, and then maybe 9 hours just to get there and then be able to do delivery. So I think what people don't understand when it comes to EDI is understanding the language and the words, and how do we ask questions? How do we put content out there? How do we engage with our workforce? How do we deliver outcomes? How do we work together? And those simple things can make such a big difference within our organization. And then we have to look at our approach and our tone within organizations. I want you to take a moment just to see if you can see the language within this picture and how leading questions can be different from one ethnic minority to another, and how people already profile individuals. So for instance, me coming into this, right, okay, you can't zoom into that. That's fine. I'll explain those questions, so thank you for that. So what you've got here is a question, and I'm going to, can you see my mouse moving on the screen? Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
So what you do have is you have questions that are being asked when it's somebody who's predominantly, we would identify as white British, and somebody who would be identified as ethnic minority. And the questions are quite leading. So is this your first child? So the question is, oh, what a lovely child around this. And obviously I'm not going to use the exact language, and I can share this presentation with you. And how the question is this your only child? And what you do have in here is how questions are asked, like, is the father absent, or what does your husband do? So it's understanding that when we look at individuals, we automatically profile them. And when we profile them, we already make judgments. So those judgments are those unconscious biases that we already have. So when we ask a question to any of our staff members, whoever it may be, there's nothing wrong with saying, I need time to understand that. So it's about the approach and the tone. So there's two elements to this. What is your approach and what is your tone saying? So the first thing that I would always say to any organization is understand the need and what it means. Understand your department, your workforce, your staff, your team, whoever it is, and understand what it is that they need and what does that mean to them. So the solution should be a co-design approach. Inclusiveness is not excluding anyone, but it's making it inclusive for all. A challenge is the inequalities, and a unite is for common goal. So what you find is the common goal or the common ground is going to be what's beneficial from a strategic perspective, but also from a workforce development perspective. And we get so hung up on strategic outcomes that we forget that our workforce individuals are still human beings, and that they have legal rights that are in place for them and their protection. And we as an organization have the right to be able to work together and achieve those goals. And when I take this questions picture out to communities, it's like, oh my God, we do actually stereotype and we do discriminate without even realizing, and we do profile. And that damage has been from many, many years ago. How do we change that? We change that by looking at our approach and looking at our tone. And the tone can change so much. So for instance, if you've had a really, really tough day and someone sends you an email saying, I'm just going to use Simon as an example. Simon, not happy with this. Can you see me tomorrow at 10 a.m? Or you send an email saying, Simon, thank you for sharing the relevant information with me. I just have a few questions. Could we please discuss this at your next convenience? The tone and the approach has totally changed the outcome. And it's understanding that language plays a massive impact of how people receive information. So when we look at inequalities and why people ask me why I'm still working on race and identity, why am I still working on belonging, why am I still working on inequalities? And I always say to people, I have a pride and a passion for this work. And that is the reality, that if you understood poverty, and this slide was actually taken from a presentation that we did with the police around systems lead and why the representation within the police force, and where do individuals come from and where individuals are recruited from. So what I always say to people is, if you understood poverty, you will understand multi-deprivation. And if you understand multi-deprivation, you will understand lack of opportunities. And if you understand lack of opportunities, you will understand inequalities. And understanding that poverty is a massive contributor to inequalities and what individuals can access. And they're very clear steps. So when I was presenting at the police and I was saying that where are we recruiting from, how are we recruiting from these communities, you know, how do we get representation? Do we understand that in a system individuals might not feel they belong to a system? Where does that stem from? So it's not just, you know, as simple as black and white. It's literally digging deeper and understanding that poverty is a massive contribution. I'll give you an example. When you have an area where it's an inner city area and you have a single mother who's trying her best to raise her children, she's going to send her kid to the neighbouring school, which is on the doorstep, because she's trying to make sure that she can get home from work in time, pick a child up, come home and put food on the table in time. So she is stuck within a system. Now, when you are stuck within a system, it's very hard to get out of that system unless there are sacrifices that individuals will make within the parents and services. How do you then get a person from an inner city school to be able to say that, you know, one day you could go work in London or you could go work in Birmingham when all they're surrounded by is poverty? And it's understanding how those key 4 elements tie into each other and where the lack of opportunities will come because there aren't any opportunities, because individuals won't feel that they can access those because they can't see them. They can't feel that they'll ever belong to a system. If you look at inclusion, and this is really, really important. So inclusion has to be at the heart of everything that you guys do in any way. And that is making sure that it is inclusive to everybody. Now, this slide was actually used for some work that we did for Bradford Council on building high performance teams. And what I always say is when you look at inclusion, look at your representation. Who have you got around the table? And I'll give you an example. There's an organisation I was working with in Hull, and they were saying, Sophia, you know, our organisation is seen as predominantly white British, and we don't have that representation within ethnic minority representation and so forth. And I said to them, well, is it going to be a tick box service for you, or is it going to be that you're going to have clear representation? And when I'm talking about representation, I'm not talking about just having ethnic minority or minoritized individuals around that table. I'm making sure that everyone feels that they can access that service and that they can be represented by that service. When you look at representation, you hold value to your organization, because individuals will look at your organization and say it has clear representation, it has clear inclusion, it's diverse and it's accessible. But if individuals don't put inclusion at the heart of their organizations and don't have the value, don't have the representation, they won't have the value. They won't have the diverseness and they won't have the accessibility. And I'll give you a prime example. Someone asked me the other day saying, Sophia, would you be interested in joining a position at a directorate level? And I turned, and bearing in mind that I would have 20 years ago, I would have loved to be part of this organisation, and still till today, I'd love to. I'm grateful that I'm working with them. And my response was, in 20 years, or you know, when I first wanted to join the organisation, is there anybody that looks like me within any of your senior management level, within local, regional, and national? And they said no. I said, 20 years on, there is no, I said, and they said, Sophia, you should be the first one to break the cycle. And I said, no, I shouldn't be the first one to break the cycle, because you should understand what that system looks like. And if 20 years on, I'm asking you this question, that there's not even, and when I'm talking about senior management, I'm talking about from level 5 all the way 1 to 5. There is nobody, not even a local, not even a regional or a national. So I turned around and said, why would I want to be part of a system that I feel that does not even belong to me? When I looked at your statistics of your representation, it's not even a third of ethnic minorities within that organisation. So I always say to them is have clear representation, that you have value as an organisation and that you hold that diverseness, but make sure that organisation or that you as senior managers are accessible for your workforce staff. And that feeds us into 3 things which are so key. Who's responsible? What is accountability? And why allyship? So I'm just going to let you think about that. Who takes responsibility for our workforces? Who takes responsibility for EDI? Who takes responsibility for workforce culture? Is it a tick box service, and is there accountability? I'll give you an example. I was doing some recruitment for a senior position, and this was over £100,000 job. I was the only female on the panel. And I was like quite surprised at that. Okay, I was the only ethnic minority on the panel. Okay, was that a tick box? Then I looked at it and I thought the people that were being interviewed, there was only one female that got shortlisted for that position, and the rest were all males. And even when I was doing the interviews and when I asked the question around EDI and what they've done around that, the males would not even look directly at me. They would just address the males within the room. So whose responsibility is it to call that out? And where does the allyship sit? And where is the accountability? So there are many times that there are going to be challenges, but there's positive outcomes in all of this work. That if you have an inclusive, diverse workforce, you have a representation, you have a value for a system, you have that inclusiveness, you have an understanding, you get to learn from each other. But we need to look at who's going to take that responsibility. Is it going to be top down, or is it going to be bottom up? It needs to be top down. It cannot be bottom up. We need this from levels 1 to 3 embedded strongly. And the reason why I say that is because I work with so many senior managers, directors, assistant directors, chief execs, and so on. And they have a very good vision, but it seems to get lost along the way. And we should not be scared of having difficult conversations or uncomfortable conversations, because this is not an issue that's a brown-skinned person versus a white-skinned person. That is not the issue. This is understanding systemic racism, inequalities, and privileges within systems. And that's all it comes down to, that we have an equal footing in the door, whether that be man, woman, transgender, non-binary, Muslim, non-Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Hindu. Anyone has an access, or no one who identifies with any religious beliefs, but they are just tracked as an individual entering a system. And that when they're in that system, they feel they belong. So recently we got commissioned by a school to deliver some training, and they asked us about their workforce, and they said, what would be your workforce model? And I said, this would be our workforce model. And they said to me, what would you say should be the theme? And how should we look at this? And I said, do you know what? It's all about belonging. If your staff and you feel you belong to a service or a system or an institute or whatever organization it is, you will get the best out of your staff. But if your workforce feels that they don't belong, and let's break belonging down in a little context. So what is a workforce team, and how do you get a workforce model that is around understanding social psychology? Know your team representation. Bring a whole range of expertise around the table. And if that's going to challenge you or question you, that's okay, because you're working together for a common solution. Respect and value your workforce opinions. So if, for instance, an organization approached me and they asked me about prayer facilities, what do they need to provide? What do they need to provide? And they said, you know, Sophia, I felt comfortable asking you. And I said, there's nothing wrong with asking a question. It's the approach and the tone in how the questions are asked. And there's no right and wrong. We can't blame one individual or one ethnic group for this issue. What we have to then acknowledge, though, the reality of it is that when it comes to EDI and when it comes to representation of ethnic minorities, they've not had an equal footing within the door, even down to the opportunities that people will receive in terms of getting up the ladder. So respect and value your workforce and understand them and engage with them. So I know people will be like, right, okay, we're going to hold a voices group around ethnic minorities, or we're going to hold a voices group around women, we'll have a voices group for men. I understand that sometimes that can seem like a lot, but you know, when you take time to understand your workforce, you'll be able to engage effectively with them, because they will feel that they are respected and valued, that their opinion matters. We must be transparent and we must take responsibility. And I say this to any of the senior managers that I work with. I always say, be transparent and be honest and take responsibility. So if you didn't get it right, then say, you know what, Sophia, we got it wrong. Can you help us look at this? Maybe we need to reevaluate this. So we just got asked to do a cultural audit for an organization. And they were like, Sophie, we've had reports of racism, we've had reports of inequalities, and we've had reports of, misogyny. Please, can you do a cultural audit review for us? We really need to know what's going on, and we'll look at the recommendations and we'll take it forward. It's okay to have independent people involved and ask independent people to come in and review and support you. It's not about going in, an independent person's going to come in and say, right, okay, this organization is not accessible. It doesn't have accountability. It doesn't hold responsibility. It's about where are the gaps? How do we develop them? And how do we work together to make sure that, that workforce is diverse and accessible? And how do we motivate and empower our workforce? So first, get to know your teams. Know that they hold respect and value. Understand and engage them. Do consultations, do internal reviews. Ask your staff what they feel like. Be transparent, be responsible, be diverse, be accessible, and motivate and empower. Don't see it as a system that's going to drain you out. See this as we're moving forward and we've always got learning to do. When you look at women's rights within the workplace, there's still a long way to go, especially when you look at women's rights within maternity, women's rights whilst they're pregnant, what women feel like within the workforce, what men feel like at the moment within the workforce. And it's about understanding your teams. And that should not be a chore for any organization, because I just feel doing a consultation, how do you feel? Are we a good organization to work for? Done. No. Ask your teams, do they feel part of the system? Do they belong? Have they experienced discrimination? Have they experienced any kind of issues where they feel that they've not been able to approach? We did a review with an organization, and one of the biggest problems was that staff didn't feel comfortable of calling it out because they were scared of what the impact was going to be from their senior managers. But it's about having a voice at all levels and not just one level. We shouldn't have bullying culture within the workforce. We shouldn't be having inequalities even till today. But what we can say is every day we are learning. We might not get it right today, but tomorrow we're working towards getting it right. And when I look at EDI champions, I don't just look at ethnic minority individuals, because I have worked with some amazing white British people who get it and who want to be part of it and they want to support. So don't just see this as allyship only lies with one ethnicity. It doesn't. Allyship lies with all of us coming together. However, the challenges and concerns are this: have we become a politically correct society? But who dictated what we are allowed to say or not say? And this is one of the biggest challenges organizations will have, because they're scared to say something in case it's not politically correct. But we have a duty to protect our staff. We have a duty to care for the well-being of our staff. So why do we not create safe environments for them to have those difficult conversations? And I remember when we delivered Islamophobia training for HR staff within an organization, within one of the largest colleges in Bradford, and they emailed me afterwards and they said, Sophia, your training has now come back into our office and we're still having discussions about it, because it's opened up so much thinking that we never even thought about how do we address this. And one of the simple things was someone's name, and getting someone's name right and how that makes an individual feel. And one of the things that I always say is that if we can learn to say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, then I'm sure we can learn to say people's names right or pronounce them correctly. And if we don't know how to pronounce the name, that we ask questions. I'm really sorry that I don't, I want to make sure that I get your name right. Can you just tell me, please, how do I pronounce this? And that is it. There's nothing to say. And it's okay to say that I'm not sure. The amount of times that I get called Sophia, and I'm like, no, it's Sophia. And it's like, all right, Safia. And I'm like, no, it's Sophia. And it's okay. So what we've got to remember is that it's okay to get things wrong, but then it's okay to ask questions if we're not comfortable or we're not sure of something. And I always do that myself. I want to make sure I give everyone the ultimate respect. So I always say is that I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Could you please tell me how to pronounce it? And I really want to learn. Every day is a learning curve for me. And then sometimes you look at the political correctness and you're scared, and I get it. A lot of organizations are scared because they're still trying to understand the whole EDI work. Where does it fit in? Do we have an EDI representation? You know, now we need to have these uncomfortable conversations or these difficult conversations. They're not difficult. They become easy with the right facilitators. They become easy when we open up and we access. There's always a solution, everyone, and that is making sure that you're open and honest in your conversations. There's no blame game in this. We can't blame one. However, we have to take responsibility. The ethnic minority individuals have been the ones that have not got those opportunities. So we're not saying there's a blame game, but we have to be realistic about where do ethnic minorities sit. We have to take responsibility of how are we creating opportunities. So for instance, there's some further training that I'm doing around pregnancy and maternity, is that when a woman is pregnant, is she even able to approach her workforce and tell them that she's pregnant because she's scared of what may happen afterwards? So we need to create opportunities to make sure individuals feel part of the system, but we also need to create opportunities that we don't discriminate individuals and that those individuals feel they belong. When I say identify and the action, what I'm saying is please, 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 don't let it be a tick box for your service, your organization. Identify the need and be very raw and honest with yourself. Bring on critical voices and then take your action and take responsibility. Because how long are you going to pass the book on and give it to someone else to do? When you know in senior positions you can influence so much. But I want to leave you with one comment. And this is really, really powerful. And it is that before you argue with someone, ask yourself, is this person mentally mature enough to grasp the concept of different perspectives? If not, there is no point to argue. And that's not arrogance, that's stepping away from situations. And those situations that will then make you feel like, I'm not getting anywhere with this. Maybe I need to take it to the next level. And this is not trying to get someone into trouble. This is literally identifying the issues and taking action on those. But sometimes what you've got to realize is that some individuals will block ways for you and they will not want to progress these areas of work further. And some will be all welcoming. But don't get into arguments, because it's not an argument. The quicker people understand it's not an argument, it's an understanding of a system and addressing and challenging a system. And that's where it comes to. So what I'm going to do now, and then if any of you, obviously, I want to open up this to, you guys having conversations. If you want to book any of our services or you want any of the training that we've delivered for schools, for police, for local authorities, for locally and nationally, and these are our details. If you want to know more about our organization, then please, have a look at our website. This is like, obviously, I've been working on this area of work for many, many years. It's not something new. Been in the sector now nearly 22 years. Every day I'm still learning, and I will never turn around and say to everyone that I get it 100%. But what I can say is that I have worked, across the board, and I have so much wealth of knowledge of this, but I'm always willing to learn from other people, and we should all be open to that. So I've finished 5 minutes earlier, but I want to make sure that we have a chance for people to ask questions and for Simon to then take over and to see, feedback on what people have thought, and take it from there. Is that okay? Simon, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so very much